Done.
Yep, we're on YouTube.
Okay.
Checking Facebook.
All right. It seems to me, Madam Chair, you're good to go.
We're good to go.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining. My name is Assemblymember Radney Spichot. I am the Brooklyn Democratic Chair, and I am here today with all my colleagues of the Democratic Party. We make about 21 assembly districts in Brooklyn, a very diverse borough. We have nearly 3 million residents. Many are voters. My colleagues are as follow, and you will be hearing from them today when they ask questions. I would just want to run down the names of the Executive Committee of the Democratic Party of Brooklyn. The 41st Assembly District, we have Honorable Lori Maslow, Honorable Bradley Reed. The 42nd, we have the Honorable Josh Pierre and myself. The 43rd, we have the Honorable Shirley Patterson and Edu Hermlin. The 44th, we have the Honorable Lori Citron-Nipel and Douglas Schneider. We have the Honorables for the 45th, Margarita Kagan and Ari Kagan. For the 46th, we have the Honorables Dion Brown Jordan, Mark Traeger. The 47th, we have the Honorables Nancy Tung and Charles Ragusa. 48th District, we have the Honorables Sharon Fuchs and David Schwartz. The 49th Assembly District, we have the Honorables Tori Kelly, Joseph Bova. The 50th Assembly District, we have the Honorables Christina Naplatarski and Emil Bazile. The 51st Assembly District, we have Honorables Arelis Martinez and Julio Pena. The 52nd, we have Honorables Jesse Pierce and Josh Scala. The 53rd, we have the Honorables Maritza Davila and Sammy Nemir Olivares. The 55th, we have the Honorables Arleni Alvarado Macala and Eric Martin Delon. The 55th, we have the Honorable Darlene Neely and Anthony Jones. The 56th, we have the Honorables Annette Robinson and Henry Butler. The 57th, we have Honorable Shaquana Boykin, Walter Mosley. The 58th, we have the Honorable Melba Brown and Corey Provost. The 59th, we have the Honorable Suann Partnow and Frank Sidio. The 60th, we have the Honorable Inez Barron and Charles Barron. And lastly but not least, the 64th, we have the Honorable Joanne Seminara and Christopher McCrae. Today, we are gathered here at a public meeting in a forum, meeting with the Board of Elections to discuss the ballot, we would like to call it the ballot snafu of 100,000 ballots that were sent out to residents that had many that were mixed match in terms of their ballot envelope. Well, currently we have Mr. Mike Ryan, Executive Director of the Board of Elections, who is here to speak to the representatives of the Brooklyn Democratic Party and to discuss what happened in terms of where did the failure occur, what are the updates, what are the remedies, and how will we inform voters ballots. We want to make sure that our voters' rights are not suppressed. We certainly want to make sure that the ballots are in time received so that they have an opportunity to vote. But we also want to hear all the updates to make sure that this does not happen. We want to ensure the security of the voters' rights. So with that said, how we're going to do this, we're going to open up the floor to Mr. Mike Ryan, who is the Executive Director of the Board of Election. I will ask a couple of questions, and then those of you who are interested in asking questions from the Brooklyn Democratic Party, you will raise your hand, we will recognize you, and we'll give you 30 seconds to ask the question so that Mr. Ryan can give us enough time to explain each questions. We are here till 11:30, so we have about a little bit more than 45 minutes to conduct this forum. Thank you, Mr. Ryan. You have the floor.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to address this matter with the Brooklyn voters, the leadership representing the Brooklyn voters. So, little bit of history. Prior to June, the Board of Elections always handled its absentee ballot requests in-house. Under the old way, and certainly I don't mean to sound, but Mr. Feldman would remember when we had the pick and pull system in the borough offices, and we printed large skids of ballots so that we would have enough to distribute for absentees. A number of years ago, we went to a ballot on demand system where we could get a request for an absentee ballot, whether in office or through the mail, and we would honor those requests and print up the ballots individually and send them out to the voters from the board offices. We're all painfully familiar with the COVID-19 pandemic. In the lead up to the June primary election, there were at least a couple of dozen executive orders issued by the governor, many of which affected elections operations. And we were then required to send out absentee ballot applications in June to all active and inactive voters, a total of about 5.5 million voters total. So we recognized very quickly upon the issuance of that executive order that we would not be able to fulfill all of those absentee ballot requests by the way that we always did it in-house, that we were going to have to get outside vendors to do that work for us, given the anticipated volume. The Board of Elections has 3 ballot print vendors: Bradford Bigelow, Fort Orange Press, and Phoenix Graphics. For Election Day ballots, Phoenix prints Queens, and then the other 4 boroughs are split between Fort Orange and Bradford Bigelow. We immediately approached our vendors and said, do you folks process absentee ballots? 2 of the 3 vendors said yes. That was Fort Orange Press and Phoenix Graphics. We ended up having a series of conference calls with them in the lead up to the June primary to divide the work in a way that their processes could handle. And without really any issues whatsoever, the June primary went off from an absentee ballot perspective without a hitch. And we had over 335,000 absentee ballots distributed and mailed, at least from the printing side of it. There were some other issues, but from the printing side of it, we did not experience anything like we experienced now. So what we did was we decided, and it was circumstances decided for us, that we needed to stick with the plan that we had implemented for June, but moving forward and more long term, our plan was and still is to issue a request for proposals to see if there are other vendors that do this work and what services they could offer, et cetera. We acted under emergency circumstances in June. We carried that through for November because the process worked for June. And as I said, we made some other improvements. So we worked very diligently here at the board, and that is one of the most disheartening pieces of it for my staff. Now that pales in comparison to the potential inconvenience and confusion of the voters, I understand, but my staff worked very hard to get hundreds of thousands of applications processed and out to print vendors so that we could get these ballots in the hands of the voters as quickly as possible. The voters that were affected in Brooklyn were from the first print run of what we sent them on September the 17th. We sent them all of these absentee ballot applications. There has been some discussion as well, why did we wait till the 17th? It's actually quite simple. The State Board of Elections certifies the ballot. The ballot was not certified until September the 9th. Once the ballot is certified, then we have to go internally about the business of building those ballots and making sure that all of the ballots and the ballot styles that go to the various jurisdictions all match up. And then we have to do some testing before we send them out to make sure that they work, so that if somebody votes it, when we get it back, they're votably properly processed. So that work took about a week, and we got the information out to the vendors. There are videos available online. These machines that process the ballots are quite large, and they operate at a very high rate of speed. I'm not a tech person. I'm a lawyer by trade, but I got the process explained to me a little bit. Everybody's name and address becomes a computer code in their system. And so when these ballot envelopes are going past these scanners at a high rate of speed on this machine, it checks to make sure that the code on the mailing envelope for the address matches the code on the inside envelope for the mailing address. They had a problem, as it turned out. I got more information, Madam Chair, since the last time we spoke. The initial problem was there is literally a trap door in this inline process that drops the offending ballots, the ones that don't match, into a bin so that they can be dealt with and the mistakes fixed. That on that particular machine, and it didn't happen on the machine that was processing the Queen's ballots, the trapdoor was malfunctioning. So the tech problem that I described to you on the data issue was, as it turns out, separate from the trapdoor problem, but got solved when they were doing solved, if you will, throwing air quotes around solved, if you will, when they were trying to resolve the trapdoor issue. Their vendor said, okay, first thing, you have an outdated software, so let's go ahead and update that. When they updated the software, all of the data that you could potentially have for a forensic analysis of what went wrong was lost. So a similar problem happened in Nassau County, but the forensic data was not lost, and they were simply able to do a remail of between 750 and 800 ballots to the voters. Unfortunately, that's not the case here. So this first came, and we don't have an explanation other than ultimately human error for not appropriately going through these ballot envelopes and ensuring that the inside envelope matched the outside envelope once this problem was occurring on the line. And that's the basic explanation that we got from them. So this started to come to my attention Saturday morning last week. I got a call from a voter, and we said, okay, let me see if it's a one-off, if it's or if it's a part of a larger problem. By late Monday morning, we had identified 11 or 12 complaints, and then it continued to mushroom throughout the day. We still have right around 500 total complaints. So that seems to be in line with what the vendor is telling us, that it is not the entire universe of this print job, which was 99,477, and that it's a smaller number. But I realized fairly early on in this process, once we started to receive back explanations from the vendor and the lack of data that was going to allow us to pinpoint exactly who was affected, that the only corrective course of action would be to remail this entire print run of 99,477 to the voters in Brooklyn who were affected. The Board of Commissioners made that decision on Tuesday. As Madam Chair is aware, there was some other rather public conversation with regard to whether that was a wise choice or not a wise choice. And that ultimately got resolved. And we circled back with the Board of Commissioners on Wednesday, and they reaffirmed their decision from Tuesday to move forward with this remailing. I want to make everyone aware that this remailing is occurring 100% at the cost of the vendor. And they're making good on this error. And I'm certain that it's going to be quite a bit of money for them, but that's their problem. They created the problem and they have to solve the problem. Okay, so now what are we doing to ensure that that happens? One, we have already, and I know no one's gonna be able to read this, but we have a letter that is going into the ballot packages that everyone will be receiving, giving them instructions on what to do with this new ballot package. And we're also leveraging social media. We have information up on Link NYC. I'm not overly familiar with the publication, but there's a publication called the Brooklyn Paper, and there's a full-page ad and I believe it's appearing today. Today's Friday, explaining that you'll be getting this mailing and that you should look out for it and what you need to do. That's it in a nutshell. And I don't want to take up too much time, for questions. So that's the kind of the backdrop. And if I might just do a little advertising separate and apart from that, you should be getting your vote, your annual information notice with all of the information that you need to vote. And for those folks that don't want to vote by absentee and want to vote by mail, we are including a fast pass tag in this mailer. So if you're going to go to the early voting location or you're going to go to your election day site, that fast pass tag, you can put it on your keychain like I did with mine. It has a barcode on it. And when you go up to the poll pad, you'll be able to hold that barcode under the reader. There'll be a mat below the poll pad that tells you exactly where to hold it. It will scan the barcode and it will automatically bring up your voter record. So it will speed the process for those folks at the poll sites that want to vote in person. And it's a way to deal with the poll pads in a much more contactless way.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ryan, for the detailed explanation. Before we go to questions, can you just answer this questions in terms of
Sure.
when you're sending out this notice, how can we ensure that the voters will know that they have to vote again? How can we ensure that they are fully aware that there was some type of snafu with the first ballot information that was sent to them?
So it says right in the letter, if you have already sent back the original ballot, please also mark and send back the enclosed ballot in the provided envelope. The Board of Elections will ensure that your second ballot is the only ballot counted. That's what it says exactly in the letter.
And is it in Chinese? Is it in Spanish? Is it in the language that the Board of Election are currently?
Yes. So the reverse side of the letter has the Spanish and Chinese translations, which is the way we typically send out these communications. So that would be a way that people who utilize those languages would be familiar with.
All right. Thank you. At this point, I am asking all my fellow colleagues to, if you are interested in answering a question and we see hands raised, please use the hand raise button. For those of you who are on the phone, I think Jeff will unmute the folks who are on the phone in the event that they too want to answer questions. Again, we're asking you to please limit your questions to 30 seconds so that everybody can get a chance to ask questions. We are going to start with, these are the people that I have. We have Brad Reed, Lori Nipel, Doug Schneider, Jesse Pierce, Josh Scala, Shaquana, we have Lori Maslow, we have Christina Napoletarski, we have Nancy Tung, we have Edu, we have Sammy Nemir Lovetis. Okay, so it's going to be in that order. Brad.
Thank you. Mr. Ryan, hello. Wish this were under other circumstances. So I just have a question about how you're keeping track of if it was the first run ballot or the second run ballot. Is there like a distinguishing number or mark between the two, or are you just going by date received? How are you telling the difference?
So the ballot envelopes that are being sent out for the second run will have a red stripe on them. So that will be a visual clue immediately, an indicator to the staff that this is part of that run and that they need to be kept separately. The way that we deal with the ballot integrity is multiple cross references across various systems to prevent double vote counting. It's a more complicated process than can be really the subject of this conversation. But essentially, there are safeguards in the system that prevent ballots for voters being tabulated twice on the absentee side of things.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Mike. Now, Lori Nipel.
Hi, Mr. Ryan. Thank you for your explanation. My question is, what about people who received accurate ballots the first time, filled them out and sent them in, and will ignore a second ballot knowing they had no errors? Will the first ballot be counted?
So if the first ballot is accurate and contains no errors, it will absolutely be counted. The reason that we decided that there was no choice but to do the second mailing, as difficult as of an option as that is, we also figured that there would, for the people that returned ballots, there would be some number of folks that might not have noticed that their envelope was wrong, and they might have signed it and sent it in. The signature would then be wrong, but it wouldn't be wrong for the right person. It would be the right signature on the back, but not matching the name on the front. And then you would have run the risk that somebody who legitimately would want to vote could not vote because we had processed a ballot for them previously. And so at that point, we had to, throw the blanket over the entire universe, resend it out, and then take on the administrative burden on the back end to separate those things. And the Brooklyn, I'm confident that in the leadership of the Brooklyn office and the staff, that they will be able to do that.
Thank you. One quick follow-up question. For those who do send in an absentee and decide to vote early voting or regular election day, will that cancel out their absentee ballot?
So yes, this absentee balloting process is opening up to a new world of voters. But New York state law is very clear presently that if you vote by absentee because you think you're not going to be available, let's say you had a temporary illness, but now you recovered, by election day, and you want to vote on election day, there is nothing wrong with that. It is absolutely permitted by law. It is the right way to do it in New York. It might not be the right way in some other jurisdictions, but we're not there. We're here. And what we have to do is there is a process by which the State Board of Elections, so we do it for let me take a step back. For the in New York City ones, we do our own comparison, right? And we make sure that if you voted on a machine, your absentee ballot will be voided, and we will send you a letter saying that your absentee ballot was voided, and the reason it was voided was because you voted at your poll site, to close that loop. In addition, the New York State Board of Elections sends information from all of the other counties, and we have to cross-reference anyone in New York City who may have voted on a machine elsewhere, and we send our affidavit and our absentee information to the state, and other counties cross-reference as well. So there's a network of information that goes back and forth, and we make sure it's a common way of voiding a ballot voted, at poll site, and it happens regularly. But now we have a larger volume of people participating in the absentee ballot process.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you.
Right, the next person, I don't know, I know Jessie had to leave. Did she leave already?
Yeah.
Yes, but she had a question in the chat.
Oh, she had a question in the chat. Okay. Okay, let's honor her question. What does the vendor quality control process look like? For example, if there were a sample set of ballots being spot checked by a quality control person, my assumption is this likely would have been caught before the ballots went out the door. This is from District Leader Jesse Pierce, representing the Assembly District of the 52nd Assembly District.
So from what I've been told, and I'm not, by no means am I an expert in the processing of an inline absentee ballot system. I can tell you I've seen videos of the machines, and they are quite complex and large, and they move at a high rate of speed. What we were told is the vendor rating is one problem every 5,000 envelopes. And so the machine vendor rating is one problem potentially for every 5,000 envelopes. And the print vendor had their staff spot checking one ballot every 1,000. They did notice, and I think this is the thing that I found most deficient in their explanation. They knew at some point that there was a problem with this trapdoor, and they were trying to fix the problem with the trapdoor. And they were on the phone back and forth, and the vendor was remotely logging in to see, what the issue was. Was it a issue mechanically with the door itself? Was it that the computer wasn't telling it to open? All of that kind of stuff. So they knew there was a problem with the door, and they supposedly went forward and manually addressed the issue in this print run. But when they did that, they didn't fix the problem. And perhaps the best thing for them to have done at that point, for the sake of their reputation, and for the sake of the overall process and the voters of Brooklyn, is they likely, under those circumstances, should have scrapped the entire print run, put them in the shredder, rerun it when they knew the machine was working properly, and then we would have never been here.
Thank you. Doug Schneider?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairwoman, and thank you, Mr. Ryan, for being here. I appreciate you answering our questions. And I appreciate that this letter is going out in Chinese and Spanish, but in addition to those languages, I represent a large number of speakers of Urdu, of Bangla, and Yiddish, and what is being done to make sure that they are getting the information in the languages they speak, and that they are not losing their vote any more than speakers of English, Spanish, or Chinese.
So this issue of language diversity in New York City has been a vexing problem for the Board of Elections for quite some time. We have to follow, under the Voter Rights Act, a certain population density threshold by which we are mandated to provide voting materials to languages. And in this case, to additional languages other than English. In this case, Brooklyn has a population density threshold that requires ballot material and other elections information in English and in Chinese. I mean, in Spanish and Chinese in addition to English. We don't have a mechanism to identify all of the other languages that might need assistance. And then, as has been an issue since in the 7 years that I've been here, the other problem is equal protection clause arguments create an issue when you tie it back to the constitutional right to vote. In that, if the Board of Elections starts to provide information beyond the mandated languages, and then where does that line of demarcation stop? How many languages, in addition to the 5 languages, including English, that we supply materials to now, how many additional would we have to do? And it's not an easy problem to solve, and we certainly would have looked in the past to work with all interested parties to see how we could do that. And short of a change in the federal law, or short of a change in the state law, it would be very difficult for us to accomplish it across the board.
So just for clarity, are you suggesting that the Voting Rights Act sets a ceiling and not a floor? That the Voting Rights Act says you can only provide interpretation in those languages?
Your assessment is correct. It sets a floor. But then the question has become, and this is not a new issue. The question is, okay, if we do the 5 languages +1 or +2 or +3, is the next group that we didn't include going to come forward and say that we have to do it for them? Now, the issue from an operational standpoint for us is we have full-time translators for the languages that we're mandated to cover. And we do the ballot translations. We do that all in-house. We don't outsource that so that we can maintain control of that and the communication process, right? Because another element of this is if you're going to run for office and I'm going to translate your name into Spanish is not an issue because they use the same letter characters, but into, like in Queens, Bengali or Chinese or Korean, we have to send you a notice by law that allows you an opportunity to have it assessed to say, yes, that's a fair translation of my name. So you have the voter piece on the one end, which is very important. But on the other end, we're trying to figure out how could we manage all of these different variables with the responsibilities that we have to maintain the integrity of the entire process.
Mr. Ryan, I will say I've been pushing for that answer for many years, and to hear you confirm that is very, very reassuring. So thank you. And thank you, Chairwoman, for convening this.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking the question.
Thank you, Doug. Before we go to Josh, I just want to piggyback on what Doug said. We are working hard diligently in the state to open up language access to the top 10 administrative language with the city's administrative code, which includes all the language that Doug mentioned, as well as Russian, Haitian Creole, Polish, just a number of languages. So hopefully in the near future, we will be able to see that. Mr. Ryan, we hope that the letter that you have, we're hoping that you can post it on the BOE website.
Yes.
Yeah, if you could do that, that would at least allow us, maybe, manually, we can probably try to translate it to, our voters and so forth and publicize it. So I think that would be very, very helpful and pushing some more communication strategy, just so that we all know we are a very diverse borough with a lot of new Americans with language barriers. So thank you so much. Josh Scaler.
Thank you, Chairwoman Chairwoman Ranise, I thank you for convening this meeting. It's very important, and thank you, Mr. Ryan, for joining us. I have a lot of questions. I don't even know where to start. I'll try to keep them as concise as possible because there's a lot of people here. To start with, you didn't really properly answer Jesse's question, which was, what did quality control look like? I understand that there was a trap door, it was broken, and I understand that they didn't fix it properly. That's well evidenced by the result. We get it. But this is not a problem of a bad vendor. This is a problem of the Board of Elections screwing up, as will be widely perceived by the public. So I think, first of all, we have to just acknowledge that the onus of this mistake does not fall on an outside vendor. It falls on the Board of Elections. And so if there wasn't proper spot checking, and clearly there wasn't because all of this went out and it wasn't assessed ahead of time, the Board of Elections really needs to reassess how they manage that. And I wonder if you can speak to that and who's responsible for that and what actions are being taken to ensure that responsibility. So that's point A. And I'd love to know the answers to that. And then point B, and this is the same problem that we had last ginormous Board of Elections screw up when we had the voter roll problem. We were unable to get a response from the Board of Election that let us understand what the size and scope of the problem was. And I still don't know how many people were erroneously mailed. And we still don't know what percentage of that mailing was faulty. So how is the board trying to determine that? And let me finish, please, sir. So what is the Board of Elections trying to do to actually understand the scope and magnitude of the problem? And then the third problem that I haven't at all heard addressed and really gets to the politics of the matter. And as Democrats, we're all very aware of the president's attempts to throw doubt on this process. And obviously we've just handed him, handed it to him on a silver platter. So my question really is, what is in place to prevent voters who got other people's ballots from voting improperly? I haven't heard anybody address that problem at all. So I wonder if you can speak to those three issues.
Well, the only reason I was attempting to interrupt you was not so you couldn't get your questions out, but I want to be able to answer them. So if you could please just succinctly re-ask your first question so I could address that and then do them in turn.
Sure. First question was, I believe the first question I asked was, what controls were, I'm re-asking Jesse's question, which is what actual spot checking controls were in place that were approved by the Board of Elections and followed up on so that you actually knew that the mailing that was going out was properly addressed. I didn't hear you actually answer that. I heard you answer that there was a problem with the manual trapdoor that was properly fixed. But it's incumbent upon the Board of Elections to assure that the ballots that they are sending out are properly sent out. So what did we have in place to make sure that that was going to happen?
So I'm well aware of the responsibilities of the Board of Elections, but I'm also understanding that when you're in an emergency circumstance and you have to rely on an outside vendor to do work that prior to this time you did in-house, you have to rely on them to do their work professionally and to do it properly. Now, this particular vendor, Phoenix Graphics, has been a ballot print vendor for the Board of Elections for many years, including going back to the old strips on the lever machines.
So you had no control. So what you're saying is you had no control.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying to you is there is an absence of the ability to have control. This company is in Rochester, New York. They're processing, I would like to be able to answer the question. They process approximately 75% of the ballots for the entire state of New York. And I don't know how many other jurisdictions that they're doing absentee ballots for. All I can tell you is there was a problem here in Brooklyn and there was a problem in Nassau County. That's what I can tell you. When you hire a vendor to do a job, you don't hire your staff to go live in Rochester to watch their operation.
Yeah, no, you do. Yeah, you absolutely send somebody to spot check. You absolutely need to. You need to know that the ballots that you're sending out are on the up and up. I'm sorry.
So we had a conversation today with the State
I'm
Board of
sorry.
Elections, and the
I'm
State Board of Elections has indicated that that may be something moving forward, but it can't be a county by county basis. We have 62 counties in the state of New York, 5 in the city of New York, and every county is not going to be able to send a staffer to their to a facility to watch what the facility's doing.
Mr. Ryan, we are only Kings County, and that's our purvey, and that's what we're checking on.
We are going
The questions elsewhere don't matter to me.
Yes, we're going to move on because we want to have everybody else to ask a question, but we're not going to do this back and forth thing. We
Right.
ask a question, and then Mr. Ryan will answer it. Please, let's be respectful of everybody else's time because we literally have like less than 15 minutes, and we have a number of people who wants to speak. Did you finish answering all of Josh's question, Mr. Ryan?
I don't believe I answered the other 2, and I'll try to be brief, but I if they could be repeated.
All right, Josh, can you just repeat it?
Yeah, size and scope of the problem was really the crux.
Right, so-
and size and scope of the problem and measures in place to prevent fraudulent voting.
So size and scope of the problem is we don't know how many voters were affected. The vendor cannot give us that information, which is the reason why we're doing a remailing of all 99,477 at the voters' expense, because when they lost that data, they lost the ability to do a forensic dive into what happened. That's the explanation they gave us. As unsatisfactory as that is, that's the explanation. They have assured us that they put other measures in place, additional staff monitoring the process, as well as backing up the logs onto a separate server so that in the event something goes wrong with the machine, they're not just relying on the machine itself to provide the information, that they'll have a second source. That's what they're telling us. We have to get through this election, and our plan is to put an RFP out for absentee regular election day vendors to provide ballots, and because that contract's coming up, and absentee ballot vendors as well.
All right, thank you so much. Moving on, the next set of people who will be speaking will be Shaquana Boykin, Lori Maslow, Nancy Tung, Edu, Hermlin, Sammy Oliveras, and Chris McRae. Shaquana? Oh,
Thank
and
you, Chair.
Christina, did I miss you from before? Oh, all right, you'll go after Shaquana.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, she did raise her hand.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair, and thanks for everyone for being here. And I had a question about the Postal Service. Since we're going to be doing all of those mailings over, what do we have in place to make sure that the ballots get to people in time, and also about the postmark of those ballots? Are we going to have a date that that the mail-ins can be counted? That's my question.
Right. So in terms of what's in place, we have had extensive communications with the post office going back at least over 4 years ago, and still there was an issue in Brooklyn this past election, and there was an issue in Brooklyn a couple of elections ago where they delivered ballots to us late in April that was supposed to be for November. We did not see the volume of issues in other boroughs that we saw in Brooklyn from the post office. The post office has told us that they take their responsibility seriously and that they're going to fix the problems. In terms of the postmark, there's 2 things I want you to know. The state legislature passed a statute, it was signed into law, that the postmark date is if we receive a piece of mail without a postmark, we can still count those as valid if they're received up until the day after Election Day. So this case would be November the 4th. But keep in mind something else. If the post office does not postmark your envelope and we receive it before the deadline, the postmark is not important because we have it in our office, right? The postmark only becomes important for those days after Election Day, right? Now we're talking November 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, up until the ultimate deadline. So if people get their ballot now and mail it out well in advance of Election Day, then the postmark is not going to be an important thing to worry about. The other thing that I want folks to know as well is if you want to vote by absentee and you don't want to rely on the post office to deliver your envelope, you can deliver it to any one of the board offices in the 5 boroughs, including the general office. We're having drop boxes at the locations, as well as any of the 88 early voting locations, which are available on our website during early voting, as well as any of the almost 1,200 poll sites on Election Day. The other thing that's important is if you happen to say work in Manhattan and you know that there's an office, either a board office or an early voting location nearby where you work, you can drop your ballot there, even if you work in Brooklyn, and the board will take the responsibility to get it to the right county. So we've opened up a lot more delivery options. That having been said, for the poll sites, early voting and general election day, that's always been the process, but we're highlighting it now because of this increased participation in absentee ballot.
So to be clear, it's only one day after the election for postmark.
For the postmark issue, if we get something without a postmark and we receive it on or before November the 4th, it will count as valid.
Okay, and if it's postmarked,
and if it's postmarked properly, and we get it before it's 7 days after the election, and I think it's 10 days for militaries and overseas. So as long as we get it by the deadlines with a postmark, we're good. If no postmark, you have up until the day after Election Day for us to receive it.
All right,
Okay.
thank you so much. We're going to move on, but just quickly, just on Shaquana's, just so you know, I'm proud. That was my bill, by the way. I have to say that.
Well, and if I could further advertise, this is a, if I'll hold it up close. All right, this is a PDF of one of the absentee ballot envelopes, and Chair Bashat is also the proud author of the Red X.
Yes, thank you. But there was one question about the postmark. We were told that the Board of Election, the post office will allow any mails without any stamps, because a lot of people are not sending any, a lot of people are not putting stamps because they're thinking that it's prepaid like before.
Right.
We were told that Board of Election was told by the
Yes, actually
they will accept any ballots with no stamps.
The post office put out a public statement in that regard. And certainly I can ask Ms. Vasquez if she can locate it and get that to you guys so that you can disseminate it. But the post office put out a public statement. And in addition, I will tell you, we received hundreds, and I touched almost all of them, hundreds of envelopes from the last election, oath envelopes with no outer envelope, and the post office did deliver them. So while they might have had failures in one area, they did have pluses and kudos in another area, where even folks that didn't include the outside envelope and just mailed back the oath envelope, they delivered them to us.
Okay, great. Thank you. We're going to have Christina and then Lori Maslow.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman, first of all, for convening this forum. Hi, hello, Mr. Ryan.
Hi.
So my co-leader and I are hearing widespread reports of voters in our district who have been affected by the most recent issue with erroneous ballots. But in addition to that, there's a real sense of low confidence in the Board of Elections' ability to carry out a smooth election. And that's not just because of the snafu. That is because of a history of missteps in in-person elections and in mail-in elections. There was the 2016 purge of 200,000 voters. In 2018, ballot scanners all across New York City broke. In 2020, in the June primary, thousands didn't get their ballots in time. Thousands did not have their votes counted because of the postmark issue. So I want to know, moving forward, or maybe you have seen some lessons learned. What is the Board of Elections doing to ensure that these kinks are worked out before we get to election day? Systemically, what is the board doing to change how it carries out elections, whether they be in person or mail-in, and making sure that we are not literally learning on the job and solving these problems as they arise in real time? Because right now it is too late to solve the issue.
So I must say, in June, we were literally learning on the job. We were in the middle of a pandemic. We had to transition from processing absentee ballots in-house to relying on external vendors, something that had never been done before. I might also say that for a good chunk of the lead-in to the June primary, I had 74 people, including myself, reporting to work while we were trying to maintain social distancing in the middle of a pandemic, and we didn't get full staff starting to return until May the 8th. So I think June has to stand alone in its own box and be judged as a circumstance that was occurring during an emergency. Now, to put a little facts and figures around the situation, we had 26,000 ballots that were delivered to the post office the day before on the 21st, and then went out on the 22nd, the day before Election Day. We had almost 80,000 paper applications received at the Board of Elections between June 16th and June 21st. When you factor in the other applications that were received from the portal in the last 2 weeks leading up to Election Day, we had 335,000 applications that were processed to mail out absentee ballots, and we had only had 65 or so thousand in the previous election for that cycle in June of 2016. So we had ultimately a 12-fold increase in our demand to process absentee ballot applications in the middle of a pandemic. And while we did that, we were only one of 2 jurisdictions in the state that had an online portal that people could utilize to have their absentee ballot processed. And of course, we learned lessons along the lines from that. And now moving forward, we worked very closely with the state legislature to eliminate the requirement in the law that you can only apply for a temporary absentee ballot no earlier than 30 days before the election, and no later than 7. It was at the request of the City Board of Elections that the no earlier than 30 days language was removed so that we could immediately go live with our portal to begin to process absentee ballot applications, not confined to a 23-day window, but confined to a much larger space. And so that gave us the ability to have 100,000 Brooklyn ballots in a vendor by September the 17th. Now, had the vendor done their job properly, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
But maybe if there had been a competitive bidding process for the vendor, we wouldn't be dealing with this vendor and therefore dealing with this issue.
So to clarify that is now what we're going to go into the land of urban myth. There was a competitive bidding process. This vendor used to be the exclusive ballot print vendor for the city of New York. In 2015, on my watch, we broke that exclusive relationship up into 3 vendors, as I said earlier. In the middle of an emergency, one of the vendors told us that they didn't have the ability to produce absentee ballots like this. So we were stuck ultimately with the 2 vendors we have. The current ballot contract is coming to an end, and we will be issuing an RFP for absentee ballot print vendors. But we acted properly and under the law and pursuant to the emergency procurement rules that were established by executive order in order to be able to get this done. We wouldn't have had absentee balloting in June if we weren't able to leverage the contracts of the 2 existing vendors that we had.
Thank you. Thank you so much. To Christina's point, I just hope going forward, we also consider minority and women-owned vendors. Okay. So the next person is Lori Maslow. I see Aaron there too, but Lori Maslow.
Hi, good morning, and thank you, Madam Chair, for facilitating this meeting. And good morning, Mr. Keller.
Right.
I had Mr. Ryan, sorry. And I just wanted to build on an earlier question by Lori Citron-Nipel. If you received the first ballot and everything was correct, and you mailed it in already before this news broke, do you have to vote again on the second one that should be coming in the mail?
So if you're certain that you were correct and that you had double checked that oath envelope to make sure that your name and voter information was correct, then the answer to that question is no. But since we could not be sure that everybody had done that, we took this extraordinary step of requiring the vendor to remail out all of these envelopes again with new ballots to make sure that people, if they were uncertain, still had the opportunity to vote their ballot and vote it properly.
Okay, thank you. And I also had a second, actually a comment. I am in agreement with Josh Staler that I do believe that this snafu, that the vendor realized during the process that there was a problem. And when the news broke that this particular vendor is a contributor to the GOP, I am wondering what was going through their mind that they let the run continue. And I am in agreement with Josh that perhaps in the future, there should be someone from the Board of Elections representing the Democratic voters of the city and Kings County and all the other counties there for quality control overview.
Thank you.
Oh, that's just a comment.
But yeah, exactly. That's
Okay,
how I took it. Thank you.
All right, I'm just, and I believe Aaron has a
Yeah, just very
question.
quickly, Mr. Ryan, Aaron Maslow, election attorney. Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
From a legal perspective, I just have to ask you, the underlying legal problem is the fact that you have the oath envelope, also known as the ballot envelope, with someone's name and address, and then the signature is that of someone else if they didn't notice and they sent it in. It's the conflict that creates the legal issue, thereby rendering the inside ballot invalid, correct?
Correct. If the signature doesn't match
Right.
The outside envelope, because we wouldn't open it up.
My next question then is, suppose somebody took it upon themselves to cross off the pre-printed name and address and just wrote their own name and address and then signed their name. Will the board, and does nothing else, doesn't deal with any second mailing of an absentee, and that's all you have from that person, will the board count that ballot?
So
now the signature matches the printed name.
Right. So if there's sufficient information that allows us to identify the voter in the voter registration system, the answer to that question would be yes. It would be tantamount at that point, Mr. Maslow, to crossing out and initialing any other information on an affidavit that you would do for any type of a legal proceeding.
But what if they didn't initial it and just crossed it off?
Well, if they crossed it out, then of course but I'm making an analogy. I'm not setting forth a specific set of facts. But if they cross it out and now we know that we have the right voter and the signature matches, then we can do that.
Quick one last time. As you know, the Trump administration is counting on states fumbling the post-election counting process of absentee ballots, hoping to delay it until December 14, when electors have to be certified. What are the resources that will be given by the New York City board, which will be the entity in this country with the most absentee ballots? What resources are being deployed to make sure that the count occurs in time so that New York State's electors can be certified by the December deadline? Because otherwise New York may lack its electors and that could affect the outcome nationwide.
So the first thing that we had to do was to identify a sufficiently large enough space for us to put more staff in than we typically would do for an absentee ballot operation. So you're familiar with the process. My understanding is in Brooklyn on day one, there will be at least 40 tables open to process the absentee ballots, get them out of the envelopes, and start to get them into appropriate stacks so that they can be put through the high-speed scanners. That was not an ability that we had in June for a couple of reasons. One, we didn't have the space immediately available, but two, we had a large number of challenges and we were still working on an old process, and we had to dedicate staff to make the photocopies of the envelopes that were the subject of potential challenge. We've purchased high-speed mail scanners that will also serve as duplex PDF scanners. So when we place the affidavit envelopes into the scanners, into the sorters, I should say, to sort them and get them into their appropriate EDs and ADs, it will be simultaneously making a PDF copy of the front and back of the oath envelopes, which we will then be able to distribute to any challengers, either by email, by thumb drive, or by hard copy. And we
Right.
won't have to have that big process of renting photocopy machines and having staff standing there. That staff can then be diverted to immediately processing the absentee envelopes.
Right. Thank you. We're running a little bit behind. We have 4 more speakers, I think 3 or 4 more speakers. We have Nancy Tung.
Hello, thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, Mr. Ryan. Well, thank you for coming and have this meeting with us, but my original questions has already been answered, so I don't want to take anybody's time. But just one quick one, it's when you're saying those vendor that made the mistake that you're going to have the 99,477 ballots resent. Do you know when they're going to send it?
Oh, yes, that's actually a good question. We came to the conclusion on Wednesday. We prepped, ultimately, we actually came to the conclusion on Tuesday, finalized on Wednesday. And by Wednesday, they were already doing the reprint for the ballots themselves. And that mail is going to start to drop today, tomorrow. They'll finish the print run probably on Sunday, and then the last portion of that batch will go out on Monday. So we have released a statement that we expect those to be in the mail the week of October the 9th, which is next Friday, right? So during that week, the early part of next week to the middle part of next week, voters should start to see these replacement envelopes in their mailboxes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next person we have Edu. I don't know if he's still on. Okay, I don't think he's still on. The next person is Sammy Oliveras.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question is, well, I just want to kind of go back to what Josh Scholar said, that it is at our understanding that the BOE, it lies responsibility on the BOE, and we cannot delay that responsibility caducated to an external vendor. If you hire someone for murder, the murder is still, the responsibility is on that person. So as following on Christina Napokarski, district leader, concern about our voters, hundreds of voters concerned about the trust in the Board of Election into making sure that the absentee ballots and the entire process goes smoothly and without errors. We have very little confidence to that, given the massive and colossal delays on the June primary, which I understand given the challenges of COVID-19. However, for example, on the June 23rd primary, around 30,000 absentee ballots were mailed by USPS on June 22nd, just the day before the election. So many voters, even in my district, Assembly District 53rd, receive absentee ballots the very same day of the election, and some of them even after. So what are those safeguards? What would you commit? The Board of Election is committing to ensure that all voters will receive the absentee ballots on time, not only the batch that become with error, but that for all of those people who have requested absentee ballots. Only in the past primary, only 41% of the requested absentee ballots were returned. And from those 41% returned, 22 were rejected by the Board of Election, which, by the way, Pennsylvania and Philadelphia has only less than 2% of rejection rate. So we're talking about a fifth of absentee ballots are getting rejected when they get to BOE, and less than half went back. And a lot, would you think that I'm certain that a lot had to do with the fact that these absentee ballots were sent late. So what are those safeguards that BOE is putting to make sure that the absentee ballots and the process gets on time, but also the oversight that the BOE will implement moving forward to do to outside vendors to make sure that we conduct free and fair elections?
So I believe that I answered the question with respect to the volume and the absentee ballot processing in a prior from one of the prior questions, but I'll reiterate it. Almost 80,000 applications were received between June 16th and June 21st. Those were paper applications that had to be scanned and data entered. And when you add that going back 2 weeks before the election, we had just shy of 336,000 absentee ballot applications that were received and processed in the 2-week lead up to the June primary. So one cannot compare June to anything else. You cannot compare what happened during an emergency with the rest of time. That was a very specific set of circumstances. And as I said, we worked very closely with the state legislature to ensure that we have a wider opportunity of time to process the absentee ballots. And we have processed already and sent out to the vendor at last count that I knew, over 560,000 applications processed and sent to the print vendors for mailing already. And we're still a month away from the election. So if that doesn't give some assurance that the process has been addressed, largely addressed, I don't know what else can.
Would you know what's the percentage of the absentee ballots that has been sent already? You said the number, but.
Well, we had about 15 to 18,000 that were still in the queue waiting for processing. We caught up right from the beginning. We did not rest. As we started to get the applications in through the portal or from paper, we made sure that we were ready to go as soon as the ballots were built. And we did, and we sent out a large number on the 17th, but it happens on a rolling basis. So as they come in now, we process them. But we would encourage people to please go to the portal online, because that's the quickest way for us to process them. Now, they can still fill out a piece of paper, but if they do, it has to be scanned and the data entry has to be done, which slows down the process. So the portal works for us because we've married it to the voter registration system and the voters identified, and it just speeds up the process. And I want to say, there are two jurisdictions in the state that have their own absentee application portal: the city of New York and Erie County. And the State Board of Elections has spun up a portal to try to assist the other counties. But in the largest jurisdiction and most diverse jurisdiction in the country, we put together a way for voters to get in touch with us to apply for an absentee ballot during the middle of an emergency where no one else is doing it. And I believe that my staff deserves some credit for that hard work, because quite frankly, if we didn't have a portal in June, we would not have been able to process the absentee ballot applications, and we did it on no notice.
All right, thank you so much. We have two more speakers. We have Chris McCrae, and then we have Mark Traeger. Oh, and then we have Annette. Annette will be the last to close. Just wanted to say that the whole absentee ballot, when we moved it for more than 30 days, that was something that was recommended, and we did pass that. So that is state law, so that we're not confined to, as Mr. Ryan had said, the 23-day window So, okay, at
Right,
this,
and I'm gonna hold this up. See, that's on our website right now, which you can access by your cell phone or, on a PC. And this is an example of the types of notices that we're sending out, throughout the various digital media platforms and other news platforms. And it says attention. In this one, it says, "Attention, Brooklyn voters. If you received an absentee ballot addressed to the wrong person, click the link below," and then it has instructions on what you need to do.
thank you, Chris.
I just want to thank the chairwoman for putting this together and the Board of Elections for participating. I think my question's pretty quick and easy. I just want to point out that I'm coming from an assembly district that has 3 contested general elections, and so all of this is very real for us. It's not, it's important, obviously, for everybody's vote to count and to everything to be done in a hassle-free way. But for us, this could actually affect the outcome of some elections. So we want to make sure that we have everything in order. My question comes from a poll worker actually asked me to ask this question, and I don't have an answer. So it relates to the absentees, and I think it may not have been an issue before, but now with so many absentees and all these issues, there might be people who vote and show up at the polls more likely than they used to. So the question is, when does that get recorded? How does it get recorded so that a poll worker would know would a poll worker know if somebody had voted absentee? And do they still get a regular ballot, or do they get some other sort of affidavit if it's marked off that they've already voted?
So the poll workers will not know.
Okay.
If you show up and you vote, you vote. That's all done on the back end during the canvass process. And as I said, it's not only the City Board of Elections comparing voter history within the 5 boroughs. We now also get a file, and this is a fairly recent development. We get a file from the State Board of Elections regarding similar information from all of the other counties related to potential duplicate voters in New York City. So the State Board identifies potential duplicates and then sends them to us, and we take care of it on the back end. And as I said earlier, it's multiple data systems that have to cross-reference, and that's how we're able to know and not duplicate a counting of someone's absentee ballot along with their election day ballot. Because if we tried to do voter history on the absentee ballot, the system would reject it because it would already have voter history from the poll pads. And that's a lot more efficient now because we're uploading electronic data from the poll pads, as opposed to in the past when we had to use kind of like, you ever go to Home Depot and those guns they give you to do your self-checkout? Well, that's the kind of guns that we use to do on the paper books. We don't have that anymore. So that's a much more efficient and much more accurate way to do that piece of business.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And we have Mark Traeger, council member.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and for organizing this. Director Ryan, two quick questions. Number one, the governor said on television that the state does not control the Board of Elections, that the city council could pass a law and that could make an impact. I've been told all these years in the council, we don't have much legal power over the Board of Elections. Can you clarify first that piece? Because it's really—
Certainly. There was a little bit more to his statement than that. And I think what the governor was referring to is the city council could pass a law like it has done with others, and it's not technically a law. It's a referral to the state legislature for action and consideration. And that's what I believe that the governor was referring to. So if what I think he was saying was, if the city council has an idea about a restructuring of the Board of Elections, it should reduce that idea to writing and then forward it up to the state legislature for potential action.
So, Director, I think you know what I'm going to say next. I myself and the city council have spent years fighting for additional translation services. I've we've certainly sent letters, referrals, you name it, and we still can't get that done because the excuse that I'm told is that the state has not told the Board of Elections that this has to be done. So I have tried the method that the governor has suggested to no avail. And the reason why I bring this up now is because when we talk about correcting an error that was made, this disproportionately impacts voters, New Yorkers, whose primary language might not be English. Everyone, of course, everyone's up in arms, rightfully so. This is a very serious situation, but understand that when we deal with immigrant folks that speak other languages, it's that much more work to make sure that, number one, they recognize it was an error and that we help them get the right information. And that's where we need government's help. So what can we do to make sure that not just getting the information out to folks just primarily in English, but also in multi languages beyond just the federal, the base amount of languages, but in other, like Russian speaking, Haitian Creole, Arabic, Urdu, others. What can we do to help everyone make sure they're getting the right information?
We don't have the translators on staff that deal with those languages. So I don't really have a ready-made solution for you on that. And I know that we have gone down this path numerous times, and the answer is unfortunately still the same. We await further, direction from the state legislature with respect to mandated languages. Otherwise, we just don't have the resources and can't just cobble them together to make it happen.
You can't get a vendor like you got for this issue?
Again, it still comes back to that cyclical problem that we would have is then there are more than 5 additional languages in the city of New York. I've heard numbers of close to 200 separate languages in the city of New York. The question is not where do we start? The question is where do we finish if we open up that door and take on a responsibility that does not fall under the ambit of a mandate. And to do that midstream and then call into further question the efficacy of an election because some other language that didn't receive materials might come forward and say, well, now I was disenfranchised, and there's a potential snowball effect. And I know that you disagree with that, but that has been our answer, and it's going to continue to be our answer until we get further direction.
I mean, Director Ryan, I don't think there's anything wrong with adding as many languages as possible. You're helping more people. But, I think you've also made my point that you're saying that you have not received a state mandate to do this. And the governor goes on television and says, well, let the city council, we did. We actually put money into it as well. And
right,
we still can't get this done.
I think the piece of the puzzle, respectfully, Councilman, that you're missing is what he's telling this. His message to the city council was to pass something and send it to the state legislature for consideration. That's an important element of that instruction.
Director Ryan, I did more than that. I did that. I also have state legislators sponsoring bills, but he's not supporting them. So it's I'm just letting you know that this issue of the correcting the error it disproportionately impacts the very people that, in my view, have been shortchanged and not given all of the types of services which they deserve. And I'm going to keep at this. I think you know me very well. I'm going to keep at this.
And might I say, your constituents should be proud of the work that you've done in this regard and your efforts and your stick-to-itiveness when it comes to this. And I feel in some respects that we're in the same barrel together in this regard. We feel that we can't act legally lest we create a long line of folks that we couldn't possibly service. And that's, we've had this thing, but I respect the way that you go about your business and the efforts that you've made.
All right. Thank you, Chair, for the time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. I just want to piggyback on Councilmember Mark Traeger. He has been that lead person. He actually invited me to sponsor the bill on the Assembly. I'm sponsoring with Andrew Bernardis, Senator Andrew Bernardis, in expanding language access. And we're doing a city and a state bill. So, you know, we just look forward to support. We've been fighting for this for a very, very long time, and he's right. We've just been getting some pushbacks, but we're hoping that this coming year we'll be able to expand language access to include all these communities with new Americans and these different languages so that they can participate in our democracy. And last but not least, we have Annette Robinson to close. Annette.
Yes, hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you, Ms. Robinson.
Her video dropped now.
I do want to say that my colleagues in their assessments have been correct in terms of how there needs to be some more of a watch over this process. I don't see how we cannot provide for some deputized watchers of the process at the vendor's location. We should be able to do that. We have 62 counties. If we have a problem in our county, every county does not have the same problem that we have because they don't have the same number of people. So I do think that we can have deputized watchers in at the process, and also have also make sure that in terms of the whole language issue, why can't we contract with the United Nations in this process, or go to the various communities to begin to train people? We know that we're going to continue this process. Why can't we train some people in the various communities throughout Kings County or the state of New York to be able to be interpreters? That's my thought on what's happening at this particular time. I do think I also want to say, I don't know whether or not, are you doing PSAs on the media and also on the electronic media and also on in the paper as well? Are you doing PSAs?
Yes, about this problem specifically. Yes, about this problem specifically, yes. And that's why earlier I showed up the artwork just as an example of the type of messaging that people should expect to receive. It's also up on our website. It'll be on Link NYC. It will be we blanketed all of the neighborhood newspapers in Brooklyn, and as well as our other paid media that we do.
Well,
pardon?
Is it on the cable channels as well?
I can't.
Is it on the cable channels?
On the cable channels, no. We don't have that kind of immediate media access. No, we don't have immediate media access like that to television.
Not even a PSA on televisions. Some of them will give you that time with an issue this large. It seems as though that they would give you time to do that.
My experience has been that they require payment and that there is a contract must be in place for that. And we haven't had success in the past making access to the television, but we're leveraging all of the other ways that we can do it. The social media, things get tweeted out. We also have the advertisements going into the local Brooklyn papers, as well as other digital media sources.
Because you know that this is one of the most important elections of our time. And I don't think we'll ever see a time like this. I know I probably won't see a time like this anymore.
Right. So
this is one of the most important elections of our time.
So I'm getting some feedback from my public relations person. She said she will certainly try to circle back with the with the stations and see if they'll give it to us. And also, I neglected to mention that we are creating a small PSA video, and it's a link that we're going to share with the elected officials that they can hopefully get out to their constituents as well. So we're going to try to leverage other government partners to get that information out.
What about watches in Rochester at the plant where the ballots are being prepared? What about deputized watches at the plant?
That's not something that is in place, and it's quite frankly, given all of the other things that we have to do for this election, it's not a realistic option for us at this time.
Okay, well, thank you. I think that's one of the most important things that we can do to make sure we watch the process so that people are not disenfranchised.
I appreciate your thoughts on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Robinson. At this time, I want to thank Mr. Ryan and all of my colleagues here, their leadership for asking these questions, for being concerned, for making sure that we deserve answers to these ballot snafus and the process and how we can ensure that there's a secure way, transparent way, accountable way to ensure that our voters' votes count. And Mr. Ryan, thank you so much for taking the time to answering these questions. We certainly look forward to following up with you regarding PSA communication, regarding adding the letter on the website so that we all can have access. We also hope that you are made available for any other issues that are on board. We, as the district leaders of the Democratic Party, we are the eyes and ears of the community of the voters in Brooklyn. We serve the largest number of Brooklyn Democratic voters across the state of New York, one of the largest in the United States. As you know, people across the nation are looking at us very closely. They're looking at us very closely. And we have to serve as a model. We have to get this right. For a very long time, we've been disenfranchised, many communities. We certainly want to uphold the Voting Rights Act, making sure that everyone have access, have equity, and that it's transparent and it's there's accountability in terms of how we roll out the plan, the operations, and also the remedy plan to fix this whole issue. So with that, I want to thank you again for being with us. We might have to come back again, but hopefully not. And we look forward to working with you. And again, I want to thank my colleagues who were really, really instrumental in making this happen. They were very concerned and they've been the voice of their constituents. And I really thank them for helping make this process and this meeting happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney.
Thank you.